Hello, everyone, and welcome to this inaugural session of the GRC Engineering Roundtables. So I'm extremely excited about this one. I don't think it happened ever in any vertical. I think this is a very interesting lineup we have here. We have executives, I would say, people at a lot of different GRC automation vendors. I would say all the biggest ones are here today with us. The goal here is to go through a couple of questions that the industry has, that we have as like enterprise GRC practitioners, and also to kind of let y'all an opportunity, because I think on kind of the practitioner side, we often see a lot of things, people have a lot of opinions, but we also want to hear from y'all on your side. What do you think, your contribution to the space, answering maybe some of the questions we have, and maybe you have like great insights and you'll convince all of us, right? That's the goal. So first, to get us started, we'll go through a quick presentation, a minute each. Everyone can kind of explain what they do, what the company does, and then we'll dive right into the spicy questions that I have for you all. Let's get started.
So my name is Jay Bernardis. I'm the CISO here at Anecdotes. As an individual, as a practitioner, I've got a fairly normal background, I guess. Ex-pen tester, security engineer, incident response. I've lived and worked all over the place. Been a multiple-time CISO, VCISO, an advisor, and everything else in between. For Anecdotes, we are, I think I can say, probably the only purely enterprise-focused GRC automation player on the call. We've built from the ground up, not to solve audit streamlining, but to focus on actually like helping the day-to-day work of GRC practitioners. Purely data focused. We talk a lot about being data driven, and also aimed, targeted, and sold to GRC professionals, not to maybe like other personas. And we'll get into that conversation later. There's my unique position here. As some people on this call know, is I've been in the industry for quite a long time, and I've actually been a customer of multiple people on the call, both as a CISO and as a fractional CISO. So I've seen both sides, where some are great and where some are less great. So I think that's a useful place to stand as well. So yeah, with that, I'll let it move on.
Hey everyone, I'm Girish. I'm mainly a software engineer and a product guy first. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Sprinto. At Sprinto, we think of ourselves as a GRC automation platform, and we really focus on automating all the busy work that's typically happens around GRC activities. And we believe that GRC is fundamentally a very strategic function inside the company. And in order to fulfill that role, it has to rid itself of all the tedium that usually happens around GRC activities. Our ultimate goal for our customers is to help make GRC fundamentally about building trust and confidence about an organization's security and privacy practices. And we believe that this trust can no longer be vague or based on reputation alone. It requires hard evidence verified by third parties, needs to be current and continuous and not stale. So that's what we focus on.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Ayub, and happy to be part of the conversation. So, Nicholas Moy here. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Scrut Automation. And I'm responsible for all internal security ops, AppSec, and GRC. It's very meta. And, I think for us as a company, I mean, a GRC automation vendor like everyone else here, and, really focus on helping customers build risk-based GRC programs. A little bit about myself real quick. I've been around for a while. I've had the privilege of tackling GRC and security challenges at both ends of the spectrum, Fortune 500, seed, Series A, doing risk, ops, and architecture. And prior to that was at Homeland Security, the Obama administration, working on developing and publishing this cybersecurity framework, specifically on making sure it was a risk-based framework that wasn't a prescriptive standard. A lot of people at the time really wanted to make it a prescriptive standard, a standard of all standards. I don't know what they were thinking. Fortunately, we were successful and doing that amongst other things. Thanks again for having me on.
No worries.
Hey everyone, Jeremy Epling. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Vanta, and I lead our engineering, product, and design teams. For Vanta, we really think of it as a complete trust management platform. So taking that manual work out of security and compliance process and replacing it with continuous automation. We look at this kind of across a number of different areas, whether that be kind of, hey, you're a small company, getting your first framework, really learning what security is, trying to open up a new market and set that foundation, all the way to large enterprises that are managing really complex programs and want to drive more efficiency and reduce risk. Or maybe you're just doing something targeted like streamlining vendor security reviews or questionnaires with Vanta AI. So a myriad of different things we kind of look at. Where was I before Vanta? Worked at a couple different places, kind of around developer tools, was in developer security before that, had worked on consumer products before that. So done a little bit of everything.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm Matt Hillary. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer here at Drata. I live here in Salt Lake City, Utah. So I also lead our internal IT security, compliance, and privacy teams. In addition to doing all the fun other aspects of being a security company CISO, including being part of our product strategy, go-to-market stuff, customer success stuff, and thought leadership. I've been a CISO at a number of organizations throughout my career. Was actually born into the GRC space. I started at Ernst & Young up in the Seattle area, moved on to being one of the original team members of the AWS compliance team, back when AWS was considered a small startup inside of Amazon. Since then, I progressed to being part of a number of security and GRC programs, both large and small, privately owned or publicly traded. Many of those started from the ground up. Here at Drata, my team is customer zero. We drink our own champagne here, which also means I get the opportunity to help give feedback into the product on a daily basis, how our platform operates, and just our general strategy. A little bit about Drata, trust management platform. Drata's always had an automation-first approach, which has evolved in incorporating capable AI models to help support our processes that pain and plague our overwhelmed GRC team members. We just announced the acquisition of SafeBase, so super excited about that. We also just turned 4 years old with over 7,000 customers and just announced hitting 100 million ARR. So, but one of my favorite parts of this role is being able to spend time with amazing professionals in the space like yourselves. So as a fellow practitioner and as a friend in the trenches to all of you, hoping today to share some insight about maybe helping our listeners on their own personal journeys. So, I appreciate this opportunity. Yeah, thanks again for organizing this, Ayub. And so looking forward to learning a lot from everyone else here on the call.
Thank you very much.
My name is Andrew, VP of Product here at Thoropass. Again, thanks for organizing all of this. This is a very cool way to end the week before getting into the weekend. So appreciate that. I've been practicing in product for many, many years now, came to Thoropass a couple of years ago. And I think one of the differentiators with Thoropass, obviously we have compliance automation as well. We've thought of it holistically, however, and we are also the auditor. And we've built a tool that allows audit automation to happen end to end. So we work with both small and enterprise clients as well, ensuring that we can handle that complexity across the board.
Thanks.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Shrav, founder of Secureframe. I think of myself first and foremost as an engineer and product person. When we started Secureframe, our goal was to automate the tedious parts of the compliance process and have a more real-time, continuous view of your security. So today, we focus a lot on the depth of our automation, the configurability of our platform, and using AI to enhance the overall audit process, which is, especially important in the enterprise. Today we make it very easy to use AI to remediate issues that come up in, tests that you might not be passing, and doing things like a first review of any manually uploaded evidence. So there's a lot of exciting things coming to the space, and excited to be on the pod.
Thank you very much, Rob. So thanks a lot all for the introductions. So now we'll dive into my first question for you all, and in order of answer. So first, everyone will have 2 minutes to answer by themselves. We'll do the reverse order. So Shrav will start, and we'll go back on the other side. So my first question is around compliance commoditisation. This is a topic that's been very common now. I know I'm active on LinkedIn, but it's been common all across, stuck in a box, a lot of, phrases like this that popped up. So to kind of frame the question a little bit, of course, the automation space has been growing, like especially since 2020, this past 5 years. Some players were there before, but this past 5 years, lots of money that was raised, a lot of awareness around it. And I think also it was this push towards smaller companies getting compliant earlier in their journey towards growth and, kind of building their startups, which means also this industry was able to fuel that, which in of itself, the industry helped a ton in terms of giving a lot of light to compliance, which it didn't have that much of a limelight before. But of course, coming with that, potentially some drawbacks. A lot of people have been discussing how audit quality has been reduced. The kind of cookie cutter, like everyone gets the same SOC 2 report, which means it doesn't provide the same level of assurance, or like company sizes could be different, but then they all get the same report as well, which could devalue some part of the assurance that the automation industry was supposed to provide. So my question for you is like, who do you think commoditisation is in terms of whose fault is it? Do you actually think it happens, or do you think maybe it doesn't even exist and it's not an issue? If you think it is existing right now, whose fault is it? And if it's not yours as a vendor, who would you say in like the pipeline, or like the kind of all the stakeholders involved, you know, who would have a bit more stake in it, in this, and you know, who we should blame, right? That's the question I'm asking. Shrav, let's go with this.
Awesome, awesome. I mean, I guess we got to increase the ratings here on the show, get some viewership, get some spicy takes. I'm here for it. So I mean, look, I kind of reject the premise of the question to start with. I think the better question is, why has compliance always been so slow and painful? Why should it cost so much to get some basic security and compliance, in? If we make the barriers to entry very high to get secure, and sorry, I don't mean to say, SOC 2 means that you're secure, or any of these frameworks means you're secure. It's just kind of a starting point or a base layer that I think is great for all companies to have in place. But we will live in a much less secure world if we, say, hey, it's going to cost you $50,000 to get a SOC 2. When we first started Secureframe, that's what it was typically, costing companies to get SOC 2, and it was very confusing. It would take a year to get done. These barriers to entry, in my opinion, are completely unacceptable. And for some history on, maybe why it's been so slow and painful in the past is because we've been manually taking screenshots of things like your S3 bucket being encrypted. And that's something that should totally have been done programmatically using AWS's APIs. You'd also spend a lot of time creating documentation that can be put together more simply with automation. And so when I hear people kind of screaming and shouting, saying like, oh my God, you're commoditizing the market, you guys are creating a less secure SOC 2, I'm just like, what's more secure than going to the source of data itself and verifying it at that point and removing the tedious parts of the process? We aren't taking a shortcut. In fact, when you look at how a lot of these auditors audit, they use sampling methodologies. They look at 1 out of every 10 devices or assets. Which one's more secure, a sampling methodology or something that programmatically scans everything in a split second, right? So in many ways, I think, we're making everything, more accessible to people, and we're making things more secure while we're doing it. I think naturally, I'm trying to keep myself aware of the time here. I think naturally the things that people have been afraid about is like, hey, are auditors going to lose their job? Are we taking their job? And in fact, what I'll say is like salaries for auditors have only been going up. We've hired many former auditors here. There's been many more auditor jobs that have been opened, and they focus on higher level activities rather than, doing these tedious tasks that should automatically be verified both for security and, efficiency. And one of my predictions here is in the next 24 months, we're going to see some of the major frameworks like SOC 2, ISO 27001, FedRAMP. They will start moving towards automated compliance verification, or at least an automated version of their frameworks to decrease that barrier to entry. Who knows? I think it could happen. I think it could potentially happen this year. So I'll kind of end there.
Thank you.
Similarly, as was stated, I think it's only can be some version of a good thing, right? That more and more folks, because of all the work that's been done by our various companies, have made compliance more visible, easier to attain. So having more companies at a less barrier to entry, getting on their compliance journey sooner, that can only be a good thing. I think you touched on it as well. The reality is, though, that like the cybersecurity on IT audits, there's a lot of flexibility there, especially when it comes to SOC 2. This creates a space for quality of audits that aren't great, but companies are getting what they pay for, depending on the choice of a budget auditor. Again, we do not outsource our audit. We have our auditors in-house, powered by our next generation audit platform. And so we maintain the highest standard on our audit. We think that if you start with a high quality audit, you're going to ensure your compliance and the rest of your framework and how you're handling your business is going to be to the higher quality. And because of that, if you're looking for a 3K check the box audit, we're just not the company for you. But if you're small and you want a good audit, that's where Thoropass comes in. Or if you're enterprise and want to ease the complexity of your life when it comes to your audits, that's where we come in as well.
Man, solid start with the answers, Shrav and Andrew. I appreciate what you shared there and agree on a number of those points. You know, in B2B SaaS, like these third-party attestations have become the bread and butter. Like when you talk about commoditization, the things that we require in order to validate things between organizations, it used to be you'd put up a security website, or you'd put up a marketing webpage, or you'd have some security paper that you share with your customers, or even share your security policies. What folks eventually wanted to jump into was getting some kind of third-party validated way of doing this. We had this when we were at AWS where we're like, hey, let's use the SAS 70 to do this, right? And the SAS 70 didn't have a rubric for ways to have standardized controls, but we created ones that seemed to make sense. AICPA caught on. We're like, oh my gosh, like we need to separate you all into your SOC 1 bucket and your SOC 2 bucket and how to make this work. But we were not the ones that made this a commoditization effort. We are the ones that enabled the acceleration and go-to-market experience for, like when I say go-to-market, the GRC team members getting their stuff done and in a timely manner so that they could start building the trust between companies. You know, similar at the personal level, I believe that transparency and being vulnerable with one another is a good way to build just solid trust between humans at the same level at the organizations, right? And being transparent there. So when we talk about commoditization, many want to be more validated here. And so we're all trying to accelerate that experience to help jumpstart GRC journeys, both from the SMB space, as well as to take down, you know, a lot of the painful processes that, you know, Shrav just talked about was perfect, which was, hey, you know, we do reasonable assurance for our audits, right? We're trying to do full population analyses now that we have API and programmatic interfaces to pull and assess that every day of the audit period. For me, the reason why I have the biggest anxiety attacks before audits happen is because it's an integrity thing. We're trying to prove that we're doing what we're saying we're doing. And without the automated capabilities that we have today, that becomes a real anxiety attack because we're not capable of doing this full population analysis to know where we stand. And so I think all of us really are on this journey of trying to get there as quickly, as efficiently as possible. But honestly, with the end result of helping make sure that we really are building true trust between organizations and having these engines behind the scenes powering, you know, this effort to make it a really positive outcome. So that's where I'd start. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think my answer is somewhat similar to other people's. And like, I don't really agree that we're commoditizing it. I look at it as really raising the standard on security and compliance rather than commoditizing compliance. Like if I think back 10 years ago, it was really uncommon for a startup to get SOC 2. They just didn't do it. It was like this opaque Byzantine process that was incredibly expensive and like required lots of paperwork, and they just didn't understand it. And I think what that produced was companies that were just truly insecure and they couldn't protect their customers' data, and it wasn't good for anyone in the industry. And so I think the focus for Vanta and really like why we created the automated compliance market was coming in and trying to be like, hey, how can we help this next generation of businesses that find it really hard to get started on security? They don't know where to start. What's a good baseline? And we look at SOC 2 and ISO is like the beginning of a security journey. It is not the end of the security journey. It is starting to understand, what does it mean? What practices do you need to put in place? And let's build automation to take it from these expensive point-in-time solutions to continuous control monitoring, to automated evidence gathering, to real-time security. And I think automation has been a huge part of that in the last year. AI has become a huge part of that in the last year or two, helping people connect the different parts of their program, helping them write policies that are accurate and good, helping them ask questions of their policies. But I mean, still, as you move up market, like I think this is one of the things that security really enables is also the business driver. Like if I'm a startup today and I want to sell to a mid-market or enterprise, they're going to ask me what my security stance is. And I need some way to answer that. And I think a Vanta Trust Center is a key part of that. You could also look into just sharing their attestation, sharing their real-time controls and what's going on there. really, then maybe they get an audit, a questionnaire because it's a really big customer, and SOC 2 isn't good enough to kill the questionnaire. And so they're still going to get a massive questionnaire. It could be 100, 200, 300 questions. No one likes filling these out. Leveraging Vanta AI, other solutions to really be able to go through and automate that process. So I think there is a thing about raising the bar for security, helping people get started with the right security foundations. It has resulted in lower costs in a bunch of ways, which I think is good because it means more of the software we use every day. We're unlocking new markets for customers that they could never get into in the past. And I think we're really expanding beyond kind of just security into like full trust management, that customer relationship, your relationship with your vendors, all the different pieces that you need to really be successful and grow your company.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I mean, unsurprisingly, like many people here, I don't think it's about fault. I think it's about democratization of compliance standards. I remember sending out, being very guilty of being at Expedia, telling all our vendors to send us their SSAE 16 and SAS 70 reports, and having this very cumbersome third-party risk management process. I think now, it's a good thing that compliance is just starting way earlier and reaching smaller companies, because others have already said, and that levels a playing field for bigger companies to adopt new technology. Whereas before, it was really like pushing water up a hill to be like telling, my colleagues like, hey, this company providing this thing is providing us something that's super important for us as an enterprise. Like, what do we need to do? How can we adopt this without putting them through such a ringer? They're going to run out of money just to go through our third party kind of vendor validation process. And I think opening doors for smaller companies to access those markets, I think is great. I think we all win when startups get a chance to kind of grow and innovate, and enterprises benefit from that. And something I think, what multiple people have said, and I think Shrav said this too, about like, we hear this a lot, like compliance isn't the same as security. But conforming to a set of standards do force companies to address security in a methodical way instead of randomly. And I think if someone were to ask me for my advice as a security practitioner, like, hey, should I go about this in just like some top 10 list from a LinkedIn carousel, or should I take like a methodical approach to kind of right size based on the risk for my company to go do the right things? I'd be like, it's not perfect. It's not the be all end all. It doesn't eliminate all questionnaires. God, I wish it would. And I think that's just important, right? I think that's only going to help all of us as both customers of security tools, for guys like Matt and myself, but also for people trying to help companies adopt technology like the ones that all of us here on the call provide. But for democratization, I think to work well, like if we just kind of lift and shift frameworks and standards that were built for a lot, perhaps bigger compliance teams and bigger organizations like in Amazon, I think that won't necessarily make it better for these smaller companies. And I think all of us exist here to kind of try to close that gap and say, like, these things have existed this way and were created this way. Well, now we're trying to close this gap so smaller companies can actually adopt some kind of standards-based approach. I think, in the future, it'd be great to see if like enterprise buyers expand their risk assessments from just like, hey, send me this thing, to also include like contextual risk assessments for like based on how they're using that vendor's product. And smaller companies obviously have to look at the quality of their auditors, and there should be more education and awareness for them to look at, like, what are the peer review practices for this firm? What is the audit frequency? And making sure that the licenses are up to date. And then I think for us as an industry, I think to Shrav's point, like, are there ways that we as an industry can develop maybe more pragmatic, and more technical? I think like just having actual kind of validation that, I think will be to everyone's benefit. So.
Thanks. Thank you. Girish, your turn.
Is it me? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record right now. Echo a lot of points that were said by a bunch of the other folks, and the way the question was posed, the implicit assumption is that commoditization is a dirty word, but I really think there are two sides to this coin. If by compliance commoditization, we mean that it is now more accessible to a large number of companies, then I'd say it's a good thing, because at the very least, it raises the baseline of the security and privacy practices that these companies have, and it raises that bar. And I think it's generally a net good thing. And in a way, I'm actually happy and that Sprinto and some of the other companies over here have contributed to make that happen. It's like having seatbelts in the car. Yes, they are commoditized, but yes, it also means that people are staying safe. If I understand the gist of your question, if by commoditization you mean that in the pursuit of making compliance fast and easy, we are not really doing what's necessary, or we're cutting corners, or we're taking shortcuts, then that's obviously bad. And to take the same example, it's like slapping on the safety belt, but not actually buckling up. So, and I'm going to, for the sake of the conversation, I'm going to imagine that you meant the second case of it and not the first case. I think we all universally agree that the first thing is good. And if I were to focus on that bit, I guess the question to ask is really who's setting the rules of this game? And the two parties who actually hold power over here are the third-party risk management teams who actually do the vendor due diligence and who are actually asking the other side for these compliances. And then there are the auditors as well. Now, if both of these parties are actually paying a lot more attention to the actual controls, whether the controls are matching the exact context of the company and the risk that the company poses, and whether they are being tested adequately, etc., then yes, this whole system is going to be a lot better. Rather than blindly trusting compliance as a stamp of trust, this will be a lesser and lesser issue. And I honestly feel that the industry is moving in that direction. But to echo what everything I think here is saying is that let's not make good the enemy of best. In general, the fact that more and more companies can now afford and access compliance tools and raise the bar of their of the security and privacy practices and make that more continuous and more automated and more visible and transparent and authentic to a third party is a net good thing. But there are some other things that can happen over and above this to basically improve the whole state of the system. Those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. Jake?
So I think it's Animal Farm where it says that all are equal, but some are more equal than others. I feel like Anecdotes is a different design, so it's a bit of an odd place for us to sit in this call because we were designed for a different purpose, for like selling and solving the problems of GRC teams in complex GRC programs in large enterprises. So a lot of this call is talking about the democratization of compliance, allowing smaller companies, SMBs, into the game to level that playing field, and that's a whole different argument. And I think, look, I've been publicly pretty open personally and as a company that we do think there's been commoditization in the industry. I agree to Matt's made a comment which you can't see as an audience, but to read is it's actually driven by customers in the market. And I think there's accuracy in that statement. I don't think technology providers in this call set out to commoditize SOC 2. I think what happened is the go-to-market motion drove it. So once you move from selling to a GRC audience, or at least to a security practitioner, to selling your product to CPOs, CROs, CEOs, people who are driven by different purposes and desires, then you do inherently change the value of that product. Once it stops being about GRC and it starts being about sales and security, or sales enablement and security enablement, you move from effective and programmatic, and as Matt's pointed out about completeness and accuracy, to being driven by what's quick and what's cost effective. And that in turn leads to a devaluing of auditing. Once auditors then have to match that and kind of provide a SOC 2 for 5,000, to Shrav's point and to others, like I disagree. I don't think there should be $5,000 audits. The reality is the profitability margins on that, most of us have been in auditor rooms, have driven them down to less experienced auditors spending less time focusing on test results where they cannot verify the completeness or accuracy of the data that they're relying on. And there also, you have that non-biased relationship. There's multiple vendors who either co-sell with auditors or have auditors who are solely reliant upon that vendor for their stream of revenue. And then you have a bias in the auditor as well as having a low-cost option. So I think you get to a point where you devalue the trust. And we're now at that point, right, where we work with multiple enterprise customers who go, I don't trust SOC 2s. If they're supported by certain vendors, I have an inherent inability to distrust them. And so I think there has definitely been commoditization in the industry. I would stand probably separately from many people on the call. I think it's a problem we need to fix. I don't agree with Shrav, I'm afraid. Like, I don't think that we're going to get rid of automating the review. And I hope to hell that we don't get to the point where we completely automate SOC 2 and FedRAMP and ISO and remove the auditor portion, because unless you can guarantee 100% completeness and accuracy on the data being set in, which again relies on your customers being competent in doing that, then we get to a point where we're auditing and attesting on incomplete data or inaccurate data because the scoping was wrong. So that terrifies me. I think, again, like I said, Anecdotes was built for a different purpose. We're built to sell into enterprises with large-scale GRC teams, GRC programs, and we're not here to replace auditors or to streamline audits. We're here to solve those problems by adding data and adding value and getting away from saying test results, but just saying, look, we can give you the completeness and accuracy of the data set. You can provide that to an order. You can also use that to drive real meaningful value and change your organization. But it's not about how can you get a SOC 2 as quickly and cheaply as possible, because for me, that's become a problem.
Thank you very much. Okay. That's good. Jake had some spice added to the conversation. Okay, that's good. So what I'll do is I'll summarize what I've heard from everyone, and then I'll ask a follow-up question, and then we can get into more of a discussion. So I think a lot of the way you kind of answer the question is like, when you say commoditization, what actually is happening is democratization. So a lot of people have access to it, have access to compliance, which was not the case before. So it's more about making it more accessible, cheaper, closer to the inception of the company instead of way down, and potentially also making sure it's not a blocker for the company growing. Because if it's like pre-seed, seed, Series A, maybe they don't have the budget for a full-scale audit with Big Four, et cetera, et cetera. So going through this, they can automate the evidence collection and also make the audit cheaper, which means they can stay afloat and continue growing. So I got all that. And you were also saying that, it was raising the standard of the industry just because there were more and more people getting into compliance. And faster and lowering the cost does not mean, like at face value, does not mean reducing the quality. So something I wanted to say to get us started is Jake's talked about like selling to like kind of business related stakeholders versus selling to GRC people. So of course it relates to the second question, so I don't want to get too much into it because the second question is around enterprise. But what I would say is like, there's this shift that we saw where you sell to different stakeholders because the companies are smaller. You don't have a GRC staff in a company that is 50, 100, 150 FTEs. Most likely you sell to a CTO, a co-founder, a different stakeholder, because they don't have budget for GRC people. Most likely they shouldn't have, because they just need to like grow and sell. So for me, the question I have on this front is, when you're selling to stakeholders that can't really gauge the security they're getting out of it, because they're not security practitioners themselves, or the security team is like 0 or 1 individual, how can you say that it's not impacting the level of assurance they're getting, even though you're selling to people that can't gauge the level of assurance because they don't have the skills inherently, right? So how can you say that, because those people in reality, it's not their role to understand security in depth. So they can give a lot more agency to you as the platform, because you also automate the understanding of the process because it's not their role. I hope my question made sense, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I think for me, when I look at this from the Vanta perspective, for us, I do think that they're asking us to be their trusted partner. And I feel like that is part of like what this is about, where they're coming and saying, like for us, when I look at our smaller customers, it is 100% like startup founders, and you can go even smaller. It's like a startup founder of like a 6-person company, right? And they've just come out of a YC batch and they are like, hey, I know this is important, but I'm not an expert in it. Can you help me understand it? And I think that that's a really exciting, powerful place to be for people, like where you can really join them in this journey and teach them and help them see what it is. Like, should they, like, basic questions. Should I secure my data at rest? How do I go do that? Like data in transit, like helping them get their basic policies and SLAs and systems and vulnerability management going. I think there's a lot to me of like exciting things to help people on that first step of the journey. And I take a lot of pride in being able to go do that. Will they be as sophisticated as a Fortune 500? I mean, no way. And like, they're probably going to have a lot more employees before they hire their first dedicated security person. But there's a reason that they care. And I don't think it's purely some like, I want to just get a sheet of paper. Like there are definitely people that are like that and like they just want to do that. And I think there are systems and products and auditors that like don't try to hold the bar like as much. I think we've all kind of like probably experienced that with different areas we've worked with, but I think there's also for us, like we have a close relationship with like over 50 auditors that we work with. Some of them are like extremely large, some of the top auditors here. And I look at like what is the appropriate audit for the stage of that customer. And, you know, if you're a 100-person business or, you know, let's say you're a 20-person business or a 5-person business and you're trying to find product market fit, there is like a different level of like risk that you think about. Like the biggest risk is like, are you going to be successful as a business? But you still need to protect, you know, your customer data. And so I look at that as us helping them on that journey to find that and then helping them mature over time. So we can be like, hey, you have grown, you now have this amount of revenue, you do have this amount of customers. Now you need to think about the next step. And maybe that means stepping on to a more sophisticated auditor. Maybe it means doing more CIS tests and controls and not just being so kind of laser focused only on a single compliance standard, but expanding into real continuous control monitoring, real vendor risk management, real risk management, and doing that. So I look at that as like an exciting partnership that we have with people as they go forward. But like, yes, there's definitely been issues. And I think we work a lot with our auditors as much as we can while still being independent with them, which I think is very valuable to set a bar and to make sure that we feel like they're holding a bar. So when people feel like, hey, there's a SOC 2 they got and Vanta helped on that and this auditor, we feel really good about backing that up.
I think that one thing that's interesting here, and Matt and Jeremy both introduced themselves and their platforms, and they do their current marketing materials as trust management platforms. And I think it's about separating here the difference between GRC automation and trust. So what Jeremy's speaking to, I don't disagree with, right? I've been in CISO and VCC roles where I've been customers of both Drata and Vanta in small startups and helping them. And I think for that initial journey to go from nothing to demonstrating something, to enable your sales processes to work, to build trust, hence the term trust management platform, 100%. Like I agree, the products are there and they are then democratizing access to enterprise customers by enabling people to demonstrate an entry-level security posture. What I think is that is not GRC automation. So I think that the automation piece is about taking complex existing programs and, to Matt's earlier point, programmatically with the completeness and accuracy of data, being able to drive those into more efficient and more effective problem-solving functions for now. And that's a very different world to what a lot of us here are talking about. Like they're completely different. It's apples and oranges. And I think that's the key thing to point out when we talk about these two things, that they're different.
You're right to call them out, Jake. I actually resonate out, but I actually am seeing and probably hinting at the possibility of T being added to the traditional GRC acronym, right? Governance, risk, and compliance. You look at, hey, what are the objectives for that team, or even just the hardcore security team saying, what are your objectives this year? It's like, well, I want to protect and defend the company. You're like, well, why? You're like, I want to build and maintain the trust of our customers. And I think that's the culmination of all the efforts that governance, risk, and compliance does internally is ultimately to be surfaced through your trust management platform to demonstrate that externally to customers, the two sides of that coin, right? Helping them self-service, pull your stuff through the trust center, or you're also doing due diligence of your third parties as well. But Jeremy, you said something I really liked and got me super excited. It was just, you're right. It is exciting. It's powerful. It's also validating as a human that wants to just innately help another human on their journey to meet them where they're at and help them grow is such a cool part of being in this space that we're all part of. And so I just want to echo that because I thought that was a super, super insightful call out there. Really, I think, you know, meeting people where they're at versus expecting them to meet you where you're at is really where leadership is born. It's where this journey for all of us, I think, is instantiated. And I think it's cool that we now have these amazing, incredible platforms that many of our listeners here have the opportunity to select and see what's right for them, ultimately for the purpose of having the capabilities that many security teams have had 10, 15 years ago. It's amazing that now 5 years ago, we've got, a culmination of a number of tools here that many can select from to really help them on their journeys. So, but back to your question, are you like, thinking through that a bit, there's a lot of education in this space, right? If we're trying to help sell someone that may not be very technical in this space, it's a very nuanced space that requires a lot of depth and understanding. It is neat to be able to be that educator in that space to help them know, what they're getting and what they should look at and what they shouldn't. It's still something that, even with the transparency we're trying to provide, there's still going to be some level of risk there as far as either misunderstanding or may not have the available information to make a decision. Ultimately, organizations still have to come down to that tolerance level. So.
Yeah, I think, appreciate the question. I don't think GRC is something that only big teams with big budgets for GRC FTEs and experts, I think, should have. I think people who aren't GRC or security practitioner stakeholders, yes, they don't have the expertise of everyone on this call to go gauge, I think, the sophistication or, of what they're buying, but they do need to start somewhere. And then I think on us as an industry, it's our job to make sure that we get that education and awareness out that Matt was talking about. But also as a practitioner, I will tell you, like, it wasn't better for me as a practitioner when other parts of the company weren't aware of what GRC and security were doing and what risk management meant for the company. Because at the end of the day, the GRC and security teams, even at a big company with a complex GRC program, they are there to support the business. And the business are, again, non-GRC, non-security stakeholders. And if we can start that education and awareness much earlier with our marketing colleagues, with our sales colleagues, with our finance colleagues, that would have been good for me, good for 15 years ago, Nick. I would have appreciated that as a security engineer because I just, and, I don't think it's like something we can do behind the curtains of like, hey, this is a highly expert driven process. This is a highly expert driven field. Sure, but we have to find ways. I don't know what the perfect answer is, but I do know that like getting more people involved in what ways we can efficiently, I think is only going to be better for practitioners in the long run. Is it painful in the short term if everybody doesn't know everything they need to know? I mean, yeah, but learning isn't overnight, and I think evolution of our industry is not gonna, it's not gonna be perfect overnight.
So one interesting thing is like early on in Secureframe, we had a customer who outsourced essentially their SOC 2 to their mom. And this was like after we had signed a contract and we were like, oh boy. And we're like, well, do you have a computer? I have an iPad. We're like, okay, we can maybe work with this. And we went through this whole process. There was definitely like a lot of learning. And what we got through this is like, okay, there's a lot of ways we can make our product way more intuitive, easier to use, while still maintaining that level of security. And, wouldn't be a podcast if we didn't bring up vibe coding in this day and age. But more and more people are getting into coding, and soon it's going to be ubiquitous across everyone. It's going to be just something that you take in your first grade elementary school class. And with that, security needs to become just as easy to implement. So we are all for making it more accessible to people with less technical knowledge. We want to decrease the barriers to entry to be as secure as some of these Fortune 500s, in the future.
Yeah, I echo what, sorry, Jake, you were saying. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, just echoing what Jeremy, Matt, and Shrav said here. I don't think companies need to have a GRC person in order to be able to do GRC. And some companies can afford and they should absolutely do that. But there is a certain size and maybe the resources of the company, which means that you can do that. And there is no reason why they should not be able to adopt some sort of a GRC posture unless they have access to this particular person. So one of the things that I'd like to say is that what a large number of compliance automation or GRC automation tools do is not just decrease the barrier to entry in terms of cost, but also in terms of the expertise that's required in order to be able to pull these things off. And I think that's an important distinction. And it's important that these companies actually get access to something like this. And I have no shame in admitting that, in fact, I take pride in the fact that we actually help them be able to do something like this. And I think that's a fundamentally good thing. At the same time, it's I think Jeremy hinted at this, and we believe that while it's our job to make sure these companies get to a certain level of security and privacy practices, it's the auditors who are holding the bar in terms of making sure that you're still doing what's necessary, what's right, given your environment, etc. And then we believe that independence from the auditors is an important aspect of running this program well in a manner that it's meant to be run. But given these two elements exist, I don't necessarily see an issue with this.
Okay, I feel like I'm always gonna be like the anomaly in the room. But
wait. Just want to make sure Andrew can speak first, and then you can go ahead again, Jacob.
Go ahead, Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I think it's been hinted at a couple times. I think to truly make sure that someone's compliance practices meet standard, the quality of that audit matters. And that's where we, being the auditor and having an audit platform, ensure that. So we work more and more with a complex enterprise customers, but even on the smaller size, really the quality of that audit is going to ensure that the practices that were put in place are actually meeting the bar. And I think that's where we can truly differentiate and help our customers. Jake?
Yeah, like I said, I think we're the anomaly because we're designed for a different purpose and we're pitching at a different market and saying different things. Like philosophically, I don't disagree with what Jeremy and Matt are saying at all. Like I agree with this being a concept about trust, but I think that's different from GRC. I don't think T should be in GRC. I think they're different things. In early stage companies, the T is there. You're trying to build trust because you want to sell your product. In later stage companies, the vendors we work with in the Fortune 100, they're not trying to build trust with their customers. That's not their primary focus. Their primary focus in the banks is to make sure they don't get fined. Like their primary focus is to comply with regulations, international and national and federal. So I think there's a different spin there. They're not thinking about how am I going to help my salespeople go to market in a more effective and faster way, in the way that a lot of smaller cyber startups or software vendors are. I think to the second point, I think in terms of like democratizing capability in GRC, this one makes me like kind of cringe as well. Like Matt, Nicholas, we're both in the seat where we hire pen testers. Like, do you want to hire a pen tester who's going to go and use Burp Suite Pro or just an AI tool? Or do you want a guy who's experienced, who's gone and like done this thing properly and has experience and knowledge and expertise around it? Like, yes, democratize it, fine. Like allow somebody's mum the capability to understand what's going on in security, but don't trust them with like the security posture of when you're selling to enterprise listed businesses and tell them, well, this person was enabled through technology to be able to show and demonstrate trust. Like that's just terrifying. There should be some kind of standard which you can do that at entry point, but it shouldn't be how we're managing our GRC programs. There should be expertise. There should be barriers to entry. There should be based knowledge requirements. And we should be driving that with data to improve existing processes, not trying to disrupt the whole thing altogether and saying your mum should be able to demonstrate GRC to a Fortune 100 company.
You're right, Jeremy. I just want to have something. So, Jake, I get your point. Of course, the current topic is around commoditization, right? But like, commoditization, from my understanding of practitioners, does not come from enterprises because enterprises have the budget needed to run their GRC program, most likely. So I'm like, when people are speaking to me about commoditization, they speak at the SMB and mid-market levels where before there was nothing and now there's something. But of course, auditors did before, they were not auditing SMBs because they had no audits to go through because they were not able to pass certifications because they didn't have the budget. So I'm like, I think a lot of practitioners, they see the coming in an SMB and mid-market space of like, oh, everyone getting through this process as something that could lower common denominator what SOC 2 is about or ISO any other. But at the same time, like they don't have a GRC team. So you can't sell to the GRC product to someone that doesn't have a GRC team, if you get what I mean? Because like enterprises are not as impacted by commoditization in my understanding of what people were speaking about.
They're the ones driving the commoditization problem. Enterprises have lost trust in their vendors because their vendors are demonstrating a posture they no longer have faith in, partly because they're relying on a green light, red light process, but also because they're relying on auditor attestations that they don't trust because of their inherent commercial relationship with software vendors. So I get your point. Enterprises have a different purchasing acquisition, but the enterprises are the ones very much speaking about commoditization because they're saying we can't trust our vendors' SOC 2s anymore. Like that's literally the conversation we are having with our customers.
Okay, I get what you mean. I want to make sure everyone can still speak and stuff, but like from what I was speaking, of course, auditors say that often. Traditional audit firms, I've heard that a ton. From practitioner at the enterprise level, like of course it's an issue in TPRM, which is a whole other topic, right? But if the TPRM teams, because what I'm thinking is like everyone here in this room, if the TPRM teams accepted none of the SOC 2s from all of the vendors here, everyone would be out of business, right? Because there's no way anyone could be in business right now if the TPRM teams on the enterprise side were refusing all the SOC 2s. So I'm like, at least maybe the bar is lower, but at the same time, if the quality was so poor, then everyone at the enterprise level, they have robust TPRM teams with proper budget to do the assessments. So most likely, if they accepted it, either they don't read them, which is a different topic altogether, but if they read it and they accepted it, then it means all the startups could go through and sell to them.
I 100% agree with what you're saying. I respectfully disagree with Jake here. Like, look, mathematically, if what you're saying is true, then all these firms would be out of business because no one's willing to accept their SOC 2s, and that's not what's happening at all. In fact, I think what was happening several years ago is most of these companies were not getting any sort of certification or getting very bare minimum security reviews or a security questionnaire that they would fill out, and now you actually have people getting, certifications where an audit has to be done and some sort of attestation can confirm that, hey, you are meeting these security controls. And ultimately, if people didn't trust that, these firms would be out of business and no one would work with them. I think there are maybe 4 to 5 people on LinkedIn that are driving all this controversy for whatever reason, when we are like overall increasing the security of all these businesses where it just wasn't happening before. So I just fundamentally I disagree with all that, and mathematically I think it's not possible.
Yeah, I mean, I know at least for Vanta, like we're at well over 10,000 customers, and I'm sure with all of us combined, we're in the tens of thousands of customers there. So like, there's definitely a lot there. And again, I'm not going to say that like certain auditors don't go to like a much higher level of depth than others. And like one of the things that I've seen is as companies mature, oftentimes they change their auditors and they want to go to an auditor that they think will provide even more depth. You could argue how much of that is real versus brand versus other things, but like I know they do a lot more work. I'm sure of that. And they're looking at a lot more evidence and asking a lot more deep questions. And so I think there is this kind of transition that happens for companies as they mature on like who they want their audit partner to be, what that means to them, the pressure they're getting from different customers, which I think probably leads into like whenever we get to the next question around like enterprise GRC, kind of like touches on that one. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited that like Vanta and everyone else in this room has at least like helped raise the bar for all these other companies that were literally doing nothing before. And now we've gotten them to like a common baseline and are like continuing to push them forward and push our auditors to go do more. And I think that's a really exciting transformation of just like raising that min bar. But again, it is the min bar. And like we want to keep helping people do better. Ideally, they can do better with even less work or at least the same amount of work. And I think that's the exciting product problem that we're all trying to go solve is really, hey, how do we make this even easier to be more secure, which lets those security teams then focus on what really matters, which, a lot of the time isn't some of the quote paperwork associated with some of these GRC processes, and like let them really focus on like, these are the top risks and I need to go deep here and drive value here versus some of the kind of like reporting, administrivia, other things that we can handle for them behind the scenes.
No, I agree. I mean, many organizations are resting on the laurels of their auditor standards. And that's super frustrating as like an organization that goes and says, hey, like we're doing great, but it's like to whatever auditor level you use, their level of standards. And we need to grow beyond that. And the journey doesn't stop at the audit. The favorite, some of my most favorite practitioners to spend time with are those that tell me, Matt, I don't fear the auditor. I'm not here to fear the auditor. I am here to burn down risk at my organization. I'm here to raise the bar. Audit is just part of the outcome of that whole journey and making sure that we're doing what would be up to industry standard. And so it's very cool to be able to see folks look beyond the audit, look beyond, what may be there, and even just continue to push their auditors. Those folks that are like, sure, I'm going to bring a higher tier auditor. And I hate that that's even a term, that there's higher tier versus lower tier. It's just a thing. And I also, experience what I would probably call auditor roulette. But the idea there is like, honestly, you're right. We do need to have some standardized way that we can trust these going forward, because these are the mechanisms and forums that we've set up to communicate and convey trust between organizations. And it needs to be at that state where, hey, it's not just at that level, it's to continue to press forward. So you're right. We continue to raise that bar as we all journey on down this path together.
Perfect. I think it's a perfect segue to the next question. So next question was around the enterprise market. So the question is half kind of directly GRC related and also kind of more on the business economic side of how your companies have been evolving in terms of the market you're targeting. So I've been through all your websites. I've been through some of this. I know customers from, I know personally customers from every single platform here as well. So discussing with like a lot of people that manage GRC programs at the enterprise level, of course, I'm a bit skewed towards B2B SaaS, but I do also know people that are more on the traditional, every company is a software company now. So, everyone's kind of getting to that level. So we've seen a very, very good capture of the market on the SMB and mid-market side. So I think now, speaking to founders and stuff, like now they understand they have to go through one of these companies to kind of turbocharge their way to compliance and unlock new opportunities, enterprise market, etc. When you get to bigger corporation, of course, there's a lot of, let's say most teams would already have something before all of you would come into the picture. Okay, they probably have a legacy GRC tool, an extremely complex setup, potentially of like homegrown tools combined with some spreadsheet, unfortunately, some stuff, and I want to understand kind of there's marketing around how all of you all are approaching enterprise, but in terms of like, I'm looking at all the names, all the customers, I see that a lot of the bigger enterprises are still tough to reach for this market. And I wanted to know, is this something now, of course, you're probably more focusing on because of course the use cases for smaller companies are a bit easier to fill because, AWS, GitHub, Slack, like all the connectors you need to build are fairly similar. But when you get to bigger corporations, you have hybrid cloud, very complex setup, lots of connectors that you can't get out of the box. So my understanding is like, the question I want to ask is like, what's been missing in terms of the strategy for enterprise? Maybe the market's growing and now all of you are going to maybe focus more on that segment and build more custom kind of product features for them. And also maybe it's not like your core focus. So also I want to also hear from you all, like, is it something that you actually think is like top priority for you? Or maybe, maybe helping SMBs in mid-market is also a very fair goal because most likely, a lot of the issues in supply chain come from the smaller suppliers anyway. So I wanted to kind of understand that. We'll go first order. So I'll start with Jake. For like first, everyone can speak and then we'll go through the discussion again.
Yeah, look, I think everyone's going to say they've got enterprise customers that focus on the enterprise space because it would be suicide for any SaaS vendor not to. I think we're slightly anomalous in the fact that we're pretty open in our stance that we were built for this from the start. That's always what we targeted, which in itself is hard. Like it's hard from the output as a startup to go, we're going to go and start to big enterprise. That's the problem we want to solve. And I think that we're at the point now where we've got customers in the fortune with billions of dollars of revenue and tens of thousands of employees, and that we're standing up and challenging and fixing their programs, which are complex and difficult. And I think the kind of two things we've learned from that are what enterprises want, which is different maybe in the startup space, is they care about data and they care about customization. So like on the data fact, like the data is oil quote has been used over and over and it's boring and tedious, but like data drives knowledge, like knowing what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. You need real data. And not only do you need real data, you need to verify the completeness and accuracy of that data. So like, if you look at how Anecdotes drives, where a lot of platforms drive on kind of a binary response to a tool, like you to an API call, you're either yes or no. Like we actually just post the data in a digestible and consumable way in that control. So you can see the whole historical run, the variance and everything else in between. And that also enables you to look at it and go, well, actually, I can understand and see what that means, like what it says. And from I hate Matt's term, I know I hate it too, but like this top tier, middle tier auditor thing, like if you look at the top tier auditors, they're the same. They want data, whether it's, and it's problematic. They still rely on this kind of like sample sets, but they want real data. And so I think data is really key when you go to enterprises, and they often have the top tier auditors. And we partner with them, right? You go on our website, so you've seen we partner with the Big Four, the Shelmers, the Qualifiers, etc., and they rely on the data we produce. I think there's also the play that says, and you said to it as well, that a lot of them are on legacy tools. So whether that is your ServiceNows, your SAPs, your Archers, your metric streams, and a way that Anecdotes is maybe different from some of that. I don't know if other vendors in this do this, so please correct me if I'm not the only one, but like we sell as a mid layer as well, as a data engine, saying, well, actually just stay on ServiceNow, stay on audit board, stay on like Archer. We'll go and sit there in between, collect the data, verify its completeness and accuracy, and post it into the controls for the existing customizable GRC tool you already have. And that's a very different approach, which resonates with enterprises in a way when they don't want to go and buy a brand new UI. They've already got something engraved and built in the company that's used by multiple functions. ServiceNow is not a security tool, it's used across the whole org. So that's one point, like how would you supply that data and how relevant and valuable is that data? The second is customization. When you start with an SMB and startup space, you enable them. And I think one thing that Shrav said, Shrav, we might disagree on lots of things, but I think we agree on a few things. Like being able to sit there and teach people how from day one to build it. Mate, we're all friends. we can build a program from day one and educate the user on how to do that. That's brilliant. And I think some of the tools in this space, Vanta, Drata, all of you, right? You're fantastic at helping startups go from 0 to whatever number that is, like helping enable people who have no idea what they're doing. And that is by unquestionably an incredible value to the industry. The problem is once you go into enterprises, they don't have that. They already have like super complex programs that aren't the same, that they inherited from other people, that conflict with each other. And then customization becomes really key. Like customizing from the top down, from the fact that you've got to customize frameworks, you've got to customize them inside of what the controls are, you've got to customize then how the evidence and what evidence is collected. You need to have custom APIs, in my opinion, when you go to the enterprises. They won't accept like having admin creds and open APIs. And even beyond that, you need to have to run custom tests. So when you supply the data, we can go, a lot of ours go, well, that's great, but like I want to run this test. And we go, that's not in a control. Like we can facilitate you doing that because that's how we customize the product, but that's not related to any control. So I think Anecdotes is very different in the fact that it's built for those things. Like I said, in that audience, your audience is not even a CISO. Like we're selling to GRC directors. And to the point of like, not every team has the luxury of that. Like when we go to our audience, generally there's a team of like 5 minimum just in GRC. So that audience is saying, well, I want data to make my job better and I want to be able to customize your tool as much as I can to fit what I'm doing today. So I totally think when we get our products right that are driven by providing data, that are customizable to meet the enterprise need, I actually think the enterprise market is better for this product range than the SMB one is. Like, because they've got legacy approaches in spreadsheets and overly complex stuff, and they have a bigger need for automation than anyone else does.
Thanks, Jake.
Yeah, I kind of agree with a bunch of things that Jake said here, especially the part that the enterprise is sort of ripe for this kind of automation tool. But if I just take a step back, I feel the current state of the world is a bit like how the phone market was around 2007. You had the Nokias for personal use, and you had the Blackberries for business or work phones, and then you had the smartphone, and they were powerful enough that you didn't need these two kinds of phones. And I think basically similarly in the GRC market, you have like these monitoring automation tools, if I may call this that are typically used by technology companies. And what they really do is to help you test controls, on top of monitoring that's data, like Jake said, that gets pulled out of APIs and other things. Whereas in the enterprises, you also still see tools like Archer, MetroStream, Audit Board, ServiceNow GRC, and these focus a lot more on workflows around risk management, workflows around vendor management, workflows around evidence collection, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole lot of workflows over there. And what I personally feel is missing is a tool that can do both monitoring as well as workflow automation. There's automation that you can build on top of workflows, and monitoring, the automation that you can be building on top of this. And I think Jake said a very interesting point, which is also something that Sprinto internally believes in, like that all of this automation should be built on top of a data layer. You can pull data out of the APIs, but the data in itself should be available in a raw format, something that can be that you can build your own monitoring on top of, you can build your own workflows on top of. And that's something that we are working on at Sprinto. We have some exciting announcements coming through this year, which will sort of crystallize this point, but that's our view of the space.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, and GRC automation can add significant value in risk management specifically. The traditional GRC tools, I think, Jake mentioned some of them, have been very good at managing, I think, complicated processes, approval workflows, and a lot of times are very disconnected from real-time security signals and other sources of data that need to get into those tools. And enterprises with we're seeing more enterprises with more technical GRC teams. Enterprise is a big word, and it's not a unified monolithic group. There are ones with very technical GRC teams. There are one with GRC teams that are very much see themselves as like, kind of holier governance focus versus like, not getting into the technical piece. But I think for the ones who are working much more closely with the broader tech org, security, engineering, and et cetera, they're looking for how do we bring GRC and we think risk management specifically closer to that data and vice versa. And that there's a real advantage, I think, to what everyone on here, I think, would agree is like getting that data from the important places closer, whether it's like vulnerabilities, assets, cloud misconfigurations, that trend over time and user behavior, where you do actual risk management, whether that's in your traditional GRC tool where you're trying to do it, or maybe you're doing it somewhere else, getting that data to that place to be able to do that. So it's not such a, I think, ad hoc process, and it's not as static, and that there's probably strong potential, especially as teams have more tools now to, I mean, as Shrav said, vibe coding, whether it's vibe coding or just being able to enable more people to get access to, I mean, it used to be a real barrier to entry, right? I would hire people on our team and be like, what experience do you have with Python? What experience do you have with, so you can go do scripting and automation, because we have way more work than we're getting done in our kind of GRC and security team. But if more people are able to do that, then we think, mapping compliance controls to infrastructure directly and to flag this much earlier in the process, not just about code and application security, but kind of everywhere in an enterprise, I think it's going to be a lot better for managing risk proactively. And we're talking to a number of folks who I think are working with us directly to try to figure this out, who are from, these more pragmatic, more modern kind of tech forward companies. And I'd say, look, it's just a luxury, right? Having been at a 27-year-old enterprise that had data centers and hybrid, it wasn't exactly a lack of desire or interest to go into hyper automation. It was a tech debt. So, admittedly, like it's super heterogeneous, hybrid, custom software. There's a lot of developers who are not built here, and just kind of working through that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, like we're already in the enterprise. This isn't like, when do we break in? It's like we're there. Like in the last month, we landed 2 Fortune 50 companies, a large global bank and one of the world's largest manufacturers. So like we see them moving in this space. I think forward-looking customers see that automation is the future. They see they need to understand this myriad of data. They are drowning in like risks and alerts. And I think one of the things that's really powerful from the GRC perspective and the trust management perspective is the breadth of that offering. Like we can really start to associate pieces of data and like nodes in the graph, if you will. And this has been a big lean in for us around specifically like Vanta AI. How can we think about the mappings between risks and controls and the test results we're getting, the evidence that's coming out, your personnel, the like security awareness training they've done, the access reviews that have happened, to really prioritize the work that's coming. And I think that really resonates. These teams get a lot more specialized as well. Like multiple people have mentioned this, where you have like a whole TPRM team, right? Or you've got like a SOC, or you have like multiple different parts of the team. And so, going deeper into third-party risk management, customer trust management, whether it's automating questionnaires, having more advanced workflows there where you can assign things to individuals and to teams, and multi-layer approvals, and the customization that's been mentioned, getting access, not just like, I look at continuous control monitoring and evidence a little bit differently. And I think it starts to bifurcate at these upmarket customers where there is the like, hey, is this good or is this not? But then there's like, what is all the evidence I need to prove that? And for us, there's been a big lean in around, hey, when a test runs, what API endpoints is it hitting? What data are we getting? How often are we querying it? How do we package that up so that you have a successful upmarket audit? Because they're just not like, depending on which auditor you go to, just like has been said, they're not going to say like, oh, green check mark equals good. They're going to want to see that lineage of all the data. And that's what we want to go provide to show that we are going to that level of depth. And I think one of the exciting things to me about enterprise customers, and it's like catchphrase we use a lot internally, is like security is a team sport. And I think to like drive any outcome, it's not just something the security team can go do. Like you're strapped, like it's hard to hire talent. You're getting asked to do more. You're getting attacked not just by humans, but by AI now. You're trying to like, you're drowning in this like sea of risks and everything that you have. And so I think the more we can help those teams be efficient, which is what I think they come to Vanta for, help them focus on the top risks that they can automate more of that and get more of that time back to focus on what really matters. And then on the team sports side, like they need to go work with legal. You need to go work with the sales team when you're trying to like close a deal, or a customer is sending you red lines and you're going back and forth. It's like, oh, can we sign up for this vulnerability SLA or can we not? And how does this go back and forth? So I think being able to get IT in there, HR in there, marketing, privacy, legal, all the different people, assign out that work and help them all make progress. Because when I talk to especially CISOs, I think one of the hardest things isn't knowing what the top risks are and how to do it. It's mobilizing the entire company to care and to actually like make progress on those risks, as opposed to just being like, actually, I just want to go ship this product feature, right? And so I think being able to draw that through line with things like reporting and other areas is really helpful to kind of give that full solution. And whether it be, I think another point was made here, like, because they are big, like they're importing their program. They're not building their program for the first time. So it's like a very fundamentally different onboarding experience than, hey, I'm a startup trying to understand what to go do day one. You're working with a team of established, super smart professionals. And they're like, I already have policies. I know what these are. I have procedures, like suck these in, pull in my SLAs, pull all that in. Help me operationalize this and like make it more effective and efficient, not like produce it for the first time. So that's how I think about the kind of down market. I'm trying to get my first time certification versus I'm an existing security team and those levels of maturity that they'll push into. And then I think you need the product features, like people have mentioned, like customization, SCIM, multi-instance integrations, like everything's just more complicated. They have multiple subsidiaries, like all these types of things you have to go deal with. So I think the more we can kind of create, I think from a product design philosophy around like progressive disclosure is something that's really important to me. So, because even when you are small and you're a startup, you still need risks, you still need vendors, you still need to track all these basics. It's just, it needs to expand and get more complicated, but you don't want the product to get more complicated. So to me, the exciting design challenge that like I get to work on every day with like the team is figuring out, hey, how do we make it so that it's accessible for like the smallest company and help them be successful? But then that product like naturally grows. So when you have a team that is just the risk management team and they only do that, and just the TPRM team and like just the team for security questionnaires, maybe at like these really large companies, then like we can make sure the product works really well for them and they're like more bespoke, sophisticated workflows.
Thank you.
I like many of the things that have been said. You're right. The data layer really is the king, and is being able to develop that and provide that to our third-party auditors or whoever else needs that data to see where they're at. Jeremy said something there as well, like we need to be able to provide that for completeness and accuracy, even to the most stringent of auditors out there, like the Big Four, who want to see that whole chain from, hey, the screen print, the reason why we relied on it is because we watched you pull it from the source system. Okay, now we have this intermediary that's doing these API calls, pulling it out and being able to say, hey, the system said it was good. Now, how can I trace that back so I can trust the platform that's being provided that? Similar to what Jeremy was saying, we're experiencing the same with our enterprise customers here at Drata. Many of these large enterprise have automated this stuff themselves. Like I was up to very large cloud service providers. I was that person that was having to figure out how to automate stuff in order to help defend our organization to the most stringent of auditors. And it almost felt like lawyer to lawyer sitting at the table being able like, well, this is where it came from and this is where that, because we had goals at both those organizations to really keep our compliance and security postures strong. So I've been that person, and it's painful. Now they do have the most, I want to say, complex problems. Jake mentioned legacy systems. That's one that's big. Many are burning down risks that have been around for years. They can't get the support to be able to help burn down those risks. Many have invested millions in-house on their own compliance automation tools. They have large teams manage this, and they're either doing one of two things. One, they're sick of having to manage that in-house, or two, they're wanting to double down. Or sorry, they're sick of managing in-house and wanting to double down and getting more. Sick of managing in-house and wanting to like, hey, outsource it, or they want to double down on what they've already done so far. And many of them do have strong opinions about how to do GRC. And so again, like saying before, we really are meeting those customers where they're at, taking in their feedback. Every all hands that we have, we start out with one slide that says the voice of the customer, and it is usually from anywhere of our whether it be SMB, mid-market, or enterprise. One of those customers that is sharing their experience using our platform and helping enable wherever they're at on that journey. And many of our enterprise customers have been satisfied with either where the platform's at, and obviously have a ton of feedback to continue to help us grow to meet them where they're at on their journey. Do we have a spot at that table like you're asking here, Ayub? We are at that table, and absolutely to Jake's favorite point, trust centers, I'm going to hit on it one more time because honestly, many of these organizations, it's an organizational change management exercise for these enterprise organizations. Like they have been doing GRC the way that they've been doing GRC for the last 10 to 15 years. Infiltrating, for lack of a better term, is probably going to be the hardest thing for some of those, but many of those are like, I want to be able to display a culmination of all my work that my team is doing for our customers in such a way. Again, Jake, you hit on this earlier. You're right. It is B2B SaaS where this is largely the use case, but they want to be able to demonstrate that for their customers and be able to measure their customers' interactions via Trust Center, what documents they're pulling. And then last but not least, coupling that with deal size impacting, right? To the point to be able to say, hey, my GRC team single-handedly, was enabling $20.2 million of closed won pipeline last quarter as a result of interactions via our Trust Center for those folks that are pulling again, documents that are outcomes of our GRC efforts. So really excited about being able to help make that the first starting point for many enterprise organizations to first set up their Trust Center to demonstrate to the world what they're doing. And then after that, continue to help support them on their efforts to start that first domino in their journey of automating their internal compliance programs or offloading what they've been doing with heavy, cumbersome, potentially costly processes or teams or tools to one that has been capable and around that integrates natively with a number of their tools today. So that's our play, I think, to continue to help enterprises on their journeys to accelerate even further.
Thank you.
A lot of good stuff has been talked about, I think, hitting on nail on the head on the complexity as we worked with our enterprise customers. No one is the same as the last. And I think the one thing that really hasn't been mentioned here is the complexity and pain and drowning these folks are feeling as they actually go through the audit process. Managing multiple frameworks usually means they're in a never-ending audit cycle. Sometimes they have to do multiple frameworks across multiple products, across multiple areas in the world. And every single one of those adds its own layer of complexity. And as we partnered with them and worked to understand those pain points, what we can do is run multi-product, multi-framework audits all at once. And really, instead of being in a perpetual audit cycle all year long, we can make that happen at one time in the year. And then they can go back to the best, using their best time, handling their GRC and doing everything else they need to do from a risk perspective and really tightening their security. So we have handled and deal with the complexity of these folks. And once they've seen how audit can be done with our automation and platform, they can't go back.
Thanks.
Oh, you're on mute, Shrav.
Classic. So, today we work with many enterprise customers and public companies, and I think the rate of adoption in the enterprise is only increasing for a number of reasons. If you've ever read Crossing the Chasm, very classic startup book, one of the core concepts is that you'll have folks that are early adopters and then folks that start to adopt you, over time, and then eventually you get to the point where the incumbents and some of the slower movers, adopt you because they want to wait to see, how a lot of this stuff shakes out, whether this is a valuable tool and, wait for it to, get to the masses. And, I think we're kind of at this point now where we've crossed the chasm and, many enterprises realize that this is an essential tool that they need, at their company. You are seeing so many new regulatory frameworks, security frameworks, customer demands. The only way to really support this as a business is to use some sort of automation and have really good tooling in place. So I think enterprises are really starting to recognize how all this stuff has evolved. And what we've seen is that enterprises have, just much higher degree needs around customization, flexibility. Every enterprise looks a little bit different. We've also seen that enterprise care a lot, about AI and how that could be used to improve efficiency. So we've built a lot of things around, automatic, evidence, verification. So we'll do the first pass of your evidence that you manually upload and make sure, hey, does it have a date? Does it have the things that, an auditor might look for in a piece of evidence like this, which can help save a lot of back and forth and save enterprises a lot of time. So we've seen, a lot of adoption, and, I think that's going to continue throughout this year.
Thank you very much, Shrav. Okay, so every one of you is working with enterprise. This is what I'm getting. It's getting bigger and bigger. Okay, so now I have my question for you all. I want to get a bit deeper on this. So my question is, I spoke a little bit in my in my first point, I spoke a little bit about there's all those legacy platforms, because you're not selling to a company that has 0 and you get them from 0 to 1. You're selling to every single company that are already at 1, maybe 1.5 or 2. So what I want to understand is, in terms of almost like GTM strategy, in terms of go-to-market, it's, let's say I have a traditional GRC platform and I've been using it for a couple of years. Where do you come in? Do you displace the platform? But if you don't have the feature richness to replace it or the customizability, then I'm going to get frustrated if I offboard to get to you, right? Because as I think Jeremy was saying fairly, is like, there's this conundrum where when you're following customers throughout the different kind of stage of growth, so you need one product that kind of fit different use cases. And my understanding is like, it can be very difficult because of the customization and the legacy aspect. So I want to understand, are you a middleware? So there's like the legacy, you help with specifically evidence collection, but they keep the legacy tool for single source of truth, risk, central risk workflows, and collaboration with other teams. Or can you fully displace a legacy tool? I will also know, like, did it actually happen? Were you able to like displace an established, we all know the names, everyone already said those names, one of the established tool, and fully migrate into one of your platform? That's what I want to hear.
So look,
I'll take.
Go
on,
Girish, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
No, please go first.
Okay. So it's a difficult question. When you're asking go-to-market question, you've got no one on the call who's actually, or maybe Shrav and Girish as CEOs and founders have the most apt attitude and ability to speak to go-to-market functions. But I think for us, it's an it depends question. So yes, clearly, and we have the cases to say we have gone into enterprise that are Fortune listed and displaced the GRC platform that they had. Yes. But there's also not always the way that it works. And I think it depends on who we're selling to and what problem they're trying to solve. I like what Jeremy said, that there's lots of different complexities and problems, and it depends what you're trying to fix. So there are times when we've got internal audit. They want this workflow-driven platform like Audit Board, other competitors also exist. And they go, well, we want to be workflow process-driven. We want automation, but I don't want to get rid of this. I need this for how internal audit works. And we partner with Audit Board, and we'll go, that's fine. We'll go and sit as a data layer, as a middleware, and we'll absorb the data and push it into Audit Board. The other exists in a similar type vein where you go, well, we've got ServiceNow. We spent $5 million. No one in this call has implemented ServiceNow, and as you also have at least $1 million of consultant fees because it's impossible to stand up. So, and it's owned across the organization. So it will be owned like not by security. It might enterprise risk. It might be owned by the CFO. So you'll go, well, they'll say, we can't displace that. Like ServiceNow exists. So again, we'll sit there as a middleware layer and go, we can absorb the data, verify completeness accuracy, and push it and map it to controls in ServiceNow. We're in the ServiceNow shop, right? So I think that it depends on the problem you're trying to solve. Have we sold directly to enterprises in the Fortune listed and displaced some of those products? Yes. Do we always do that? No, because in the end, it's like, who can play well with others? What you want to do is solve the problem. We're all here sitting saying the problem is legacy approaches need to be replaced with automation and data-focused workflows or data flows procedures. And so sometimes you have to say, well, how can we help that customer the best? Is it displace the whole thing, or is it sit as a middleware and help support and enrich and improve the product that they're already using? So for Anecdotes, we'll do both. It depends on what the customer wants and what they're trying to solve, but we happily go down both directions.
Yeah, I echo what Jake said here. We're not ideological about this, that, hey, it's my way or the highway. And the eventual answer comes down to basically what's the solution that you're, or the problem that you're solving for your customer. And specifically, Sprinto is designed in a manner that it is not only agnostic to where the data comes from, it's also agnostic to where the data should eventually go to. And that could be another enterprise GRC platform like a ServiceNow or a Audit Board or a metric stream or what have you. And that's completely fine. The goal, the way we look at this is our expertise lies in being able to talk to as many of your business processes directly as possible at the source data, convert that data into useful information that you can build some monitoring on top of, some automated tests on top of, evidence collection on top of, workflows on top of, and then be able to push that data wherever it might make more sense. And that could be your data warehouse where you want to run really good BI reporting and whatever you want over there. It could be your GRC tool that you already have in place, and it could be anything else that makes sense for you. And that's completely fine. Irrespective of what we get labeled as, it's fine if we are middleware, but if it solves the problem and it creates enough leverage for our customers, that's perfectly fine.
I don't know if y'all have seen the CISO mind map, but like basically it does a good job of explaining, hey, in a mapped format, all the things we worry about as CISOs. And it's like in, I think, over 100 or so different programmatic things that just keep our minds busy. And it is an almost impossible job and role to fulfill. But I see the small component of the CISO mind map as the GRC team. It is also equally just as complex and deep. And so when you look at these enterprise organizations, so to your direct question there, Arub, is it a hybrid thing? Is it a full rip and replace? Just know that there are so many parts of this program that we can jump into to help them with and potentially replace and make that the strategy to help them where they want to go. Many of these folks have very strong opinions. Many of these folks have more experience than even I do in this career. And so it's fantastic to work with them to say what has worked for you and your organization and what was going to help you accelerate or take down legacy processes or otherwise help you grow here. And those have been some of the most fun conversations, educational conversations, as well as product and platform enhancing conversations to help them on their journey. So whether it be, AI assisted questionnaire answering, or whether it be, helping monitor one of the most basic, security controls out there. Do we do background checks of our people? Here's a provider, integrate with them. Tell me that this is always going to be 100%, or whether it be one of the more complex situations where they're like, we have our own common control framework. We use Splunk to basically take state data from all of our systems into a place, and we want to be able to pipe all of that data that has been taken out of there into your system for an associated control to show readiness. I've seen enterprises do that to make it work. Again, this is where the most customizability comes to the table around the platform. Now, we obviously don't want to get so customizable that we all become, Workdays and Salesforces, where it's absolutely painful to continue to manage and operate, and people are frustrated by the experience there. But we definitely are getting to a point where we need to make sure that we're, again, making these, again, the insertion point in their journey is the right place for us and them to help them grow.
Yeah, echoing what a lot of other folks said here, this is an area where, I agree with Jake on a lot of points. If a company has ServiceNow in place, I mean, you have to think about how ServiceNow sells. They only sell like multi-year contracts. It's like a 2-year implementation. You're spending, multiple millions of dollars purchasing it, and it's implemented throughout, at least a, 2,000 employee company minimum, I think is where they start their customer base. So if you're trying to rip and replace ServiceNow, good luck is all I'll say. Where we found, more success is, integrating with where customers are actually at. And that's not to say this about, every single tool, every single customer, they're all different. But what I've seen, especially with ServiceNow, is that customers, need some of these features like, automated evidence collection. When we first started Secureframe, our main kind of thesis was around this automated evidence collection and pulling all this data from APIs. And this is stuff that the legacy, GRC systems still don't do. And that's some of the most painful parts of, the audit process that people using ServiceNow still need. So what we do is we, kind of meet them where they are and integrate some of the automated evidence collection, mechanisms into ServiceNow's, GRC and ticketing tools. And that actually, meets a lot of customers' needs and provides a lot of value. And slowly they can, expand with us. But with certain, enterprises, they're looking, for a more modern system. They're looking for way more automation. So it just really depends on, where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar for Vanta when I look at it. It's really just like what problem is the customer looking to go solve? And if they want a full trust management solution, awesome. We've got all the pieces that you need there. But if you're just looking at customer trust and you're drowning in questionnaires, let's just work on questionnaire automation first. That's a great place to get started. Or, hey, let's have a trust center and let's have like the AI chatbot on there that's trained on your knowledge base, answer some of the basic questions. And then maybe you grow up into questionnaires. Or let's look at vendor risk management or third-party risk management. We have people that just use our risk module or just use our personnel stuff or just use like assets or just want us for continuous control monitoring. And like one of the things we've seen too is like, I think a lot of, customers come first thinking about compliance and they think about driving audit. But like for us, we released a recent new feature on like scoping and segmentation throughout all of our integrations, which has been really helpful for people to run multiple audits and to make sure that, hey, when I'm auditing its framework A or I'm doing SOC and I'm doing PCI, I know exactly what the automation's reporting on and can easily see that. And it's also given the flexibility where a bunch of our customers have come to us and said, hey, Vanta is actually a great monitoring solution for stuff that isn't just compliance related. And like, we want to see you expand into more security testing, and whether it be CIS tests that we've increased a lot of coverage on and doing other things. So I think we've seen like lots of use cases. So when I come to any of these customers, it's not kind of like, oh, you have to adopt the whole thing or like nothing will work. I feel like that doesn't work from a business standpoint. It's not very customer first. And I'm like, great, we have some awesome different modules here and products. Which ones do you need to go adopt first? And then they work even better together. So like, hey, if you're loving, what we're doing with questionnaire automation, look at our Trust Center product, or vice versa. Or hey, you want to be able to make sure that you're automatically kind of like reporting on your continuous control monitoring to your customers. If you're running your whole GRC program with us and your risk management is there, it's going to be even easier to reflect that with your customers and create that feedback loop. As like a product person, I always think of like the feedback loop. Like, I always want to be hearing from my customers what's going on. And I think one of the exciting things we've been focused on at Vanta is like completing that loop. Like GRC, it's about like creating your GRC program and security program and getting that going. But then the feedback is really that customer trust side, right? It's like from the Trust Center, from the questionnaire automation, you now understand what they're asking of your business. And then you can feed that right back in to your GRC program. And we can use like Vanta AI to suggest new controls, new risks, other improvements that you go make, and like really close that loop. So you feel confident that you're really prioritizing what matters and like solving the needs of your new customers and prospects.
Yeah, I'd just add real quick, like, I don't think, I mean, I think it'd be crazy to say just go rip and replace any of these like well-established, decades legacy kind of tools. But at the same time, having worked with a number of folks like that, obviously can't speak to the whole of our GTM strategy, but in terms of like the security and compliance use cases that, we've seen come up multiple times with enterprise folks is having trying to actually assess risk in a, we've all seen, I mean, especially for those of us who've been on the enterprise side in the practitioner space, like the risk register, the spreadsheet of things that take years to fix, and actually trying to operationalize a bit more of subsets of that, and like how do they operationalize risk management. So they already have something else in place. They have a whole stack of security tools, but they're not looking for something to replace ServiceNow or Archer. They're saying, I need to get data from very specific places because I don't want to do this kind of qualitative hand wavy thing anymore with the dreaded heat map, the high, medium, low, the 3x3 box that everyone is so guilty of having this Excel template. Anyways, you know where to download it. Like, I think they want something that actually gets closer to the data that they do have it somewhere. Obviously, for everything everyone said, there are challenges getting into the same place, and we've been pretty kind of laser focused on like how do we help this, because we've seen this for kind of a very large company that's trying to do this with trying to capture, like, they have lots of rich vulnerability data and context. They have business context from their risk management platform, but getting the two things together has been like a big, this is one, to Matt's point, like an in-house effort where they're like dedicating tons of people and time and really looking at like, maybe that's not the right way to do this. Maybe that's not sustainable. And we have our own business to take care of, than like dedicating software engineers to build a security GRC risk platform. And I think that's where we're going to continue to focus too.
Yeah, just echoing what's been said, if you are looking to completely, throw the baby out with the bathwater, it's not gonna fly. We, again, similarly here, meet folks where they're at. Do they need, a risk tool? Do they need a DDQ tool? I think, again, where we're uniquely positioned is a lot of legacy GRC tools, and we can do the audit on that as well. So depending on what your flavor is and what the enterprise needs, we can connect into whatever you're doing. Again, we can provide that very unique aspect on how we handle the audit. You have to meet them where they are. Everyone is clamoring, I think everybody said it, for automation across the board here. And even though their systems are all over the place and owned by various different individuals, they need those workflows, they need that automation. And that's what we can provide, and not just at the compliance side, but in the audit as well.
Okay, so I kind of get from all of your answers, it's almost like a modular approach where you kind of, based on the needs you get at the enterprise side, you kind of pick and choose which modules the customers can kind of integrate right now and get into the workflows. And then you have upsell opportunities kind of based on new problems you see facing as they've onboarded, as you've seen some of their challenges. So I saw a lot of specific modules you were speaking about, but I saw that the automation around endless connection was one you kind of said where most of the legacy tools, they not provide that right now. So that's a quick win you can get to them. But the question I have on that front is, don't you think it might dilute the unique selling proposition? If you like, it's so selling to enterprise, you have a modular approach, which also means you build the platform as a whole platform, right? So you build it as a complete solution. When you focus on maybe the USP you started with in the beginning, which was like evidence collection, and you sell that to bigger enterprises, like, is there not a risk as you being more replaceable because the way you've been embedded is like the lowest hanging fruit of the industry, which is what is shared by everyone? I don't know if you get where I'm coming from with the question.
So then I think this is one where there might be different views. I think it depends on what your USP is. Like for Anecdotes, the USP has never been that way. Like the USP is we're damn good at data. I think I sometimes argue with the CEO. I think we're actually a data tool, not a security compliance tool. Like we're damn good at customizing how you collect data, evidencing or kind of verifying the completeness and accuracy of that data and pushing it to somewhere, whether that's in our platform or mapping it to, like I said, we have existing partnerships, integrations with a lot of the platforms in this space, but we're really good at that piece. And I think so, yes, in an ideal world, who doesn't want to like go and replace ServiceNow and sell a $5 million deal to a Fortune 20 company? Of course, everyone does. But the reality is, like, you have to find not just where you can solve the problems best. What are you best at? We are best at the data and evidence collection piece, the mapping, the scoping, the customization. That's the piece we are really, really good at. And so, like, I'm okay with that being our sales piece. I'm also honest and open enough that I'm not a CEO or go-to-market person to say, I want to make money. Like the business wants to make money. Like we're all here because we want an exit, IPO, acquisition, whatever it might be. That's why we're here. And the reality is that you've got to find what your best way is to entry point to most of those customers. And as it said, Shrav and me are finally agreeing on things. Like you're not going to go and kill ServiceNow with these customers, but you're going to sell really good deals based on your commercial value for your company, for us, but also based on the problem-solving value for the customer. That they can't find something that does what you do. And if in your case, like for us, we're really good at data. So let's go and like pitch that point. Yeah, we've got a UI on top of it. But if you don't want it, let us do what we're really good at.
Yeah, to echo, a lot of what Jake is saying here. I think if you ask 9 out of 10 CISOs, they're going to say, I want the best tool for the job. They actually, oftentimes don't want all-in-one solutions. And I think there was a lot of controversy last year with, all the announcements that Palto Networks made. And I'm not saying that there isn't like a lot of value in these things being integrated together, but ServiceNow today doesn't have any sort of evidence collection either, or a lot of these like modern, GRC features. So this is an opportunity for them to, get the best of, both tools integrated together. So I think we're going to see, a lot more of that.
And just to add to that, I think Jake slightly alluded to this as well, but I don't think that being closer to the data and being closer to the lower level, so to speak, in the stack of GRC is actually makes you more replaceable. It in many ways, it actually makes you a lot more entrenched in the organization and the business processes that the organization runs. So I don't think I necessarily agree that sort of leaves you more vulnerable. This is purely from a GTM standpoint. So I actually feel that if you're an organization who has a more authentic picture of the data that flows in, and you build some tooling on top of that, that's actually far more resilient than anything you build on top of that.
Yeah, thanks for that. We'll segue quickly to the last question. Most likely we'll just do a quick discussion on it. I think it was like kind of small questions. It was around, so speak to a lot of GRC practitioners, enterprise levels of fairly big companies, and some of them, they're not like, currently they would not be any of customers of any of y'all. And the thing is with some of them, they often were in contact with some of the vendors and trying to understand like, how you're doing X, Y, Z. So for enterprises, in my use case, I would need this, or you would focus on like, I don't know, maybe a better common control framework ability for my specific way of managing maybe 50 or 60 different compliance requirements all at once. And from a couple of them, okay, it's anecdotal, but getting to a certain number, they said like often they would say, yes, super interesting, but then a year would go by, or 18 months, and they wouldn't see any meaningful changes in the way the tool was designed, which would make it more likely to fit their current use case. So I would like to kind of get from you, how do you see the feedback from practitioners and not current customers, right? But I'm thinking of specific use cases for them that will make them closer to potentially get into your pipeline and push it, get closer to that. And how do you kind of, combine that with your current enterprise customer that might have different questions and asks? So how do you kind of get all that feedback baked into your product strategy?
So I think in the CISO share, it's interesting because we get asked often by our exec teams to side channel and find out what people think. And I've talked to you multiple times, right? GitLab, you guys just went, we can build this ourselves, and we've got the power and the capability and the technology to do it, so we'll do it ourselves, right? And we partner with Google a lot. It's easy to find on LinkedIn who do the same thing. Like Google went and built it themselves because they're Google, right? And I think those are brilliant when you have the chances to sit down and go like, why did GitLab do it yourself? Like, what benefit have you got from doing it that you couldn't have got in our tool, or in Vanta, or in Drata, or in Scrut, or whatever else we've got here, right? Or the same, like to Google, why are you doing it yourself? Like, why are you better? I think those conversations are brilliant because often what I can gain from them is I can kind of tim off the top and go, there's some things we could actually do that are like fantastic, and we can put them into place and put them in the product roadmap and tackle people like Jeremy and Andrew with the complex problem of saying, fit that in the next 6 months, please. But at the same time, we can learn from you and go, you know what, those are great things, but we're not going to be able to do those anytime soon. Like they're so complex and they're so fundamental to us rebuilding our platform and our approach that we'd sacrifice multiple customer wins to go and fix that one problem for that one customer. So I think, yes, you like no one here is going to say, and Jeremy would say like several times, of course you listen to your customers. Of course you listen to the feedback loop. And of course you want to take those things off the top and say, this customer, if we could do this, this customer would buy from us. Great. But there's oftentimes you go, you know what, your Google, your GitLab, fantastic, amazing, love what you're doing. Are we going to build it in the next 6 months? No. Because it's not worth it for us right now. And you have to be honest and transparent as products, and hopefully in the position of Nicholas, Matt, and ourselves as security leaders in our communities to go, yeah, we're not going to solve your use case anytime soon because it doesn't make sense for us to do it commercially. Like, I love the idea, but we're not going to get there. So obviously you listen, obviously you want to help everyone's problems, but go back to my Animal Farm quote, like all things are equal, but some more equal than others. Like some problems make more sense for us to solve.
Yeah, I think any product org would agree with what Jake said. As far as noise is concerned, that's part of market research, product discovery. As with any feedback and research, you need to find out what parts of this will resonate with the rest of your customer base as well, what you basically see as driving the industry forward. And there'll be a bunch of unique things, which will be great ideas that some companies do, but you may not be able to necessarily find space for them in the immediate future. That's something that you, as a product or keep in your sort of at arm's length. It's there, and as soon as you start seeing them again on the fringes, saying that hey, there's more feedback about this, then you sort of bring it ahead. So it's never like a point in time decision saying that hey, we won't do this right now. But I think it's important, and what you were pointing to, is to just be transparent about it. Like, hey, this is definitely not in our roadmap in whatever this 2 quarters or the 3 quarters, but maybe again, and we would love to talk to you more about that, and just to be able to just do better discovery on that and to just understand the use case a lot better. And then yes, you still have to deal with the the resources you have at your disposal. You can't build everything, and you have to pick the battles you fight. So yeah, I don't think anyone here would disagree that we want to take feedback from practitioners. I think Jeremy also pointed to the point that you need a feedback loop, as any product org would need that feedback loop, and you just need to make that work. And we all work towards that.
I mean, 100%, and I think especially going back to on the flip side from our sort of earlier conversation, where it's like the GRC teams, these practitioners, long established, decades old, these are massive companies. because they are the ones who have the incentive and resources to actually mature and evolve these functions. And we believe there's a ton, I think, to learn and kind of gain from that. And then seeing the super diverse approaches, both I'm sure between Jake, Matt, and myself, it's like there's one way we did it at this company and that company, and there continue to be even more ways than I could possibly imagine for how the same, what from the outside looks the same, where it's like, hey, that's a 10,000 person company, that's a 10,000 person company. I tell you, they're completely different. Even if you were to talk to me at Expedia versus my counterpart at Booking, completely different approaches to GRC and information security. And we're both travel companies. I think it's, there's a balance where it's kind of like, as a practitioner, easy for me to kind of nerd out and be like, I really want to solve this because I'm really solving it for old self. And then there's a healthy feedback since I am not the product person or the founder. Pushback and tension where it's kind of like, okay, well, what makes sense? And there's going to be, I think, healthy questions about like, and what I appreciate about kind of working with Ayush and Jayesh, the co-founders for Scrut, is they have a fresh perspective and healthy questions for me, and kind of like, well, how does this help? What are they really trying to solve besides just make it super custom, to Jake's point, where it's like, from a technical perspective, it's not impossible to do some of these things that people ask for when they're like, I want to be able to automate getting this data here for this workflow for my TPRM program, for my risk management program. But at the same time, does that make sense commercially? Does that scale? Is that repeatable? Is there a version instead that works for, I think for now that we can get to, and I guess part of my job, I think, is to make sure there's a healthy fire on one side of that equation where it's kind of like, well, or maybe we should try harder, I think, and really kind of push to break things where it's, we don't just need to settle for like, it was done this way, so maybe we just need to copycat what they're doing. I mean, I'm super guilty of a lot of custom solutions to compliance and security problems in my tenure at a bigger company. And I look back and think like the manageability of that, not always super easy. And I think now, so it's important for us to continue getting that feedback from people who are practitioners there now, and like yourself, Ayub, who have to deal with this every day, and have to solve it with what you can and what you do, and we're always seeking kind of, especially from those teams who are trying to, I think, break things and push the envelope, seeking brutal feedback from them, and we have a number of folks that we work with on a continuous basis to get that. So
perfect. If no one else has a point on this question, we can go towards the conclusion, or anyone else wanted to say a piece?
I mean, I think the only thing I wanted to say is like, I'm really excited by what's happening in GRC engineering, especially with like the manifesto and everything that's going on there. I mean, as somebody who's contributed to many open source projects and worked at GitHub for a long time and built a bunch of open source software at GitHub, I think there's a lot we can go do to drive the GRC community together, and like us collaborate and that community get together. And I'm really excited to be a part of it. And again, like, I'm sure there will always be commercial solutions. It's not like everything will be like perfectly open source and free and everything, but I think there's a lot we can go do together. And I feel like a lot of the time the GRC community has been kind of underserved in having that representation when I think about the larger security organization. And I think the work that's happening there, I mean, Varun and Charles came to like VantaCon in like November, which was like awesome. And like, to me, there's like a lot that I want to kind of like lean into there and think like all of us as like people who care about this industry and are building products for it and are security professionals and working on it can do more, just to kind of supercharge it. So I'm excited to see like more community involvement and like work with like more of the practitioners. And, as the like, product person, I love talking to customers, and I get excited when I see that glimmer in somebody's eye of like, oh man, I love this product. And like, that's the thing I'm always chasing, is like that customer love. So
Jeremy, we have the same kind of reaction from our product team too. And I love that about just incredible product, practitioners, where you're able to really take in feedback, dissect it. I think for your organization, our organization, where we have like thousands and thousands of customers, the hardest part is that prioritization. I'm sure you have, with the number of customers that we have collectively, it's like, oh my gosh, how do we prioritize this and meet their needs with where they're at when you have that sheer scale? But you're right, the conversation is fun. even internally, we don't like, I don't like to eat dog food. And we don't like the term dog fooding, but I like champagne. And so we have a champagne channel. It's fun to be able to, every time I use our product and every time I use SafeBase platform, it's like, I will have 2 or 3 screen prints of things as a practitioner that's like, what is going on here? What do we do there to continue to improve the product? Again, I am one of that number of thousands that we have that are giving feedback to our product team. And so I just have an incredible amount of appreciation to incredible product practitioners like yourselves that are able to take that feedback, prioritize it, and deliver on it. So, but on the enterprise side of things, some of them have very specific needs that are very different from the general beaten paths. And some of them are like, maybe the old school way of thinking things are like, we want to get rid of that in this space and we're going to reinvent it together in a way that's better than it ever was before. And so those conversations are total gold, and it's fun to be a part of that. And it's just exciting to be able to see what can we do that was better than we did 5, 10, 15 years ago. I said it before, it's like, man, our security team members have had cool, sexy tools for 10, 15 years. I'm so excited our GRC team members have cool, sexy tools like we have today to really help make life exciting and work exciting too.
Yeah, and I think that mix between, at least for us at Vanta, between like the product team and our security team is so critical. Like JD is like, our CISO is like my partner in crime on everything together. And we're always like, how do we think of them as customer zero? How are we making them happy? She has like a wide ranging experience from like very large companies all the way down to like startups. And what can we go do? And I think about like that kind of involvement with hers and subject matter experts on her team and everything's really exciting.
Yeah, our product team mentioned that I've put in more tickets than all of our customers combined at one point after I joined. So I can definitely echo the sentiment that, we come in and just go, we should change it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for all the support, of course, on the GRC engineering side. I know, like, as a practitioner, when we build the manifesto and all the work happening here, actually, as we spoke, we were just starting to think about an open source kind of control security framework that we could use to automate the way you verify the completeness and accuracy of the API data you pull. So there's some of those topics we're trying to think on the open source side, and I know a lot of you have been like super supportive and like really behind some of this initiative. So us as practitioners, we really value that partnership, because like I speak for me, but I think I speak for most of the people similar to me. I think globally the industry has been net positive for GRC compliance. You kind of bring back a lot of excitement and fun and like making it cool, which I think was something that was missing in the past. Or see us like, in the corner, all those people who speak to them once a year, they ask us for 170 screenshots. So I think it's so much like faster and more interesting. So I think us with like the type of problems we're thinking about, I think the support from the industry is important, and us, it's also on our kind of it's on our list of tasks to also push you to kind of towards making some of the things more suited to like the things we're thinking about. And I think in a kind of indirect partnership, we can altogether kind of make this industry better. So I think the conversation went very well, very respectful. I think everyone had a lot of interesting points, some healthy disagreements as well. So overall, I want to thank everyone first for accepting the invitation, for everyone kind of caliber of guests we had as well. Was like very glad that you all accepted, and you all bring a lot of interesting insights to the conversation. So I want to thank everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Ayub.
Thank you.